Yes, Trish.
I literally am like 1 day away from I'm done writing.
Ooh, what are you writing? I should know, huh?
My dissertation.
Oh,
Wow,
you're now,
congrats.
I thought some ordinance.
No, I shouldn't be in charge of doing that kind of stuff.
Ooh, and they've looked at graphs of them and stuff, huh? Or is this what you're gonna show them and hope they like it?
Well, I'm hoping they're gonna like it. We'll see. It has been a lot of work. I cannot describe to you.
I can't imagine.
I know you can. I know you can.
If I can remember that far back.
My friend that's a professor at the University of Utah, he said, it almost broke me. It almost broke me.
It is an initiation without a doubt.
Well, with that happy news, I'm going to call us to order at 4:34. There are 4 members of the Planning Commission in attendance. So one we know will not be here and 2 may arrive late, but we are at a quorum. We will go ahead and move to the discussion for the minutes from July 14th. Number 5. Anyone have any comments about the minutes or would like to propose a motion to approve?
Move we approve. Second.
All right, any further discussion? Motion by Jerry, seconded by OB. All in favor of approving the minutes through July 14th? That is unanimous of the 5 in attendance. We'll move to
August 14th.
Did I say July?
Mhm.
Oh, you know what? It said July in the packet. So
Oh,
that was
yeah.
me just reading off the paper instead of using my brain. August 14th. County Commission liaison.
Okay, I have a couple of notes. I've been kind of thinking about this today, and I'm wondering if eventually we should just, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of times Elisa and I are just overlapping, right? We're saying the exact same thing, or anyway, so there's that. Just thinking about that, and maybe it's something I'll talk to Elisa about on the side. But kind of to just go over the meeting on August 15th. I was zooming in, so kind of keep that in mind. So it's not great to be there or to not be there in person. But as you may have heard, Chris Baird has resigned, so that was a huge loss to the county. But hopefully for him, it'll bring him peace and, prosperity and what he needed to do at the time. So we are eventually going to get that finance director position open. As Elisa, and these are just things that relate to planning and zoning, the TRT tracking software. I can't remember, is it GovOS? I don't know how they're saying it. Is that correct? So that passed unanimously. So we will be moving forward with that, which I think will be wonderful. As far as the ADOs, the 2 on 191, so the KOA and then Sherry Griffith, those passed unanimously. The Powerhouse ADO overlay, that was denied with a vote of 5-1. Clapper was the one, and then McCurdy abstained on that vote. The Desert Road was denied, but kind of thrown back at them to try again, because we started having quite a bit of pushback from the community on that. And so we're, seeing if we can find some kind of something in the middle where the neighbors would be okay with it. And so anyways, we just kind of push that back. And again, I'll let Elisa speak to this here in a moment. The 2890 Spanish Valley Drive, that was approved with 2 opposed, and that was Kevin and myself. And then as far as the project boundary buffer, that passed unanimously with a pretty interesting discussion. And by that time of the evening, it was starting to get fairly late. And at one point, Bill was like, I don't have the slightest clue basically what you're talking about. But, Kevin had a lot of vibrant discussion with Elisa, but the rest of us, you seem to just be hanging on by a thread. The Water Conservancy District, that was fairly contentious, but we did send forward some names to the governor. And but we changed a couple of the names that WISA had sent us. So that passed 5-2 with Winfield McCurdy opposed to that. There was a variance that came forward from Westside Woodworks on Overlook Road. And I believe, and Elisa, you can tell me, I think that's going to come back to the commission next time.
Yep.
And then, is that correct?
Yeah, September 5th will be the actual vote.
Yeah, great. And then the HDHO overlay revisions. Again, we had a little discussion. Again, I don't know what time of the evening that was, Elisa, but it was late. And yeah, so anyways, that there was, I don't really have much to say about that. I watched that again today, and I don't know if there was a lot of constructive at that point, much constructive was coming out of it. But Elisa, do you want to add anything to anything that I've said?
I think you covered it. I think that's a great summary. There was a lot in that meeting, so I don't think I have anything to add unless Jenna, you want to say anything?
No, I agree. After like 9 o'clock, it was.
It was a tough meeting. We started out early with a workshop, and then, all this stuff with Chris, and that was pretty hard on everybody. And so it was a tough meeting.
Well, thank you for the update.
Yep, you bet.
Question? Any questions? Okay. Departmental updates.
Okay, so I just have a couple little updates for you. Share my screen. It's kind of more of a, just to get the word out. Can you make it so I can share? So we did move into our new building last week, and we're still kind of just unpacking and putting things away. So it's still a little chaotic over there, but it's really nice, and we're all very happy relocated.
Did the girls have a window? I mean, Elisa, you already had a window.
There's lots of windows. Yep.
Wow.
Almost everybody has a window or at least access to natural light. So it is a major upgrade. And yeah, so we're hoping to organize a little open house with Renee is gonna help out with that. We don't know when yet, but we'll have it set probably in the next few weeks.
Good, be sure to let us know. I'd love to go take a look.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice. It's fun to have us all in the one building and kind of being able to work together that way and collaborate. So that's
what's in that building.
so it's planning, obviously, building and engineer.
Great.
And code enforcement will be there as well once we get that person hired. And this is just our little announcement. It'll be in the papers. But this is what the building looks like. It's a little funky, like the entrance and access. You kind of come off of 100 North and go through the parking lot here to go over to the building and park right here. And then it's really set up as a one-way, so you kind of need to like remember to pull into this little entrance and then go out this direction. But if you remember that it's right behind, almost just directly behind the Center Street Gym, that's a good way to find. Okay. And then the other thing that we've been working on, that will be in the papers as well, is the drainage PSA, drainage maintenance PSA. And that, I'm still have it here somewhere. There we go. So it will just remind property owners, landowners, and HOAs of their responsibility for maintaining their drainage on their property, making sure that they're not obstructing any kind of natural drainage channels and or improvements that are on the property, like culverts or detention basins, anything like that. And just letting people know that it's really their responsibility and that the county, you know, isn't gonna go and repair damage on private property, but we do have that's why we do have the stormwater and construction standards that are in place to, you know, create the standards for the drainage plans and drainage improvements as part of new development. So if people are not sure about whether they have a drainage plan or not, they can check with us, the planning department, and we can try to dig up their drainage plan. And if folks are unsure of where their historic drainage actually flows on their property, we're working with the engineer to set up a little process to maybe provide like a informal inspection to kind of provide just basic recommendations, not anything super formal, but just kind of a courtesy thing. So that's going in the paper soon.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
about number 4 here?
Mhm.
So 2 summers ago, my neighborhood was affected by the flooding in Pat Creek when it jumped the creek bed.
Yeah.
And what was uncovered was that individual property owners had received building permits to change the topography of their lots
Mhm.
in a way that altered the flow of water through our neighborhoods. But the county at that point said it wasn't the responsibility of the county, even though the county had issued these permits, it was the responsibility of the homeowners to get together, form an HOA, hire an engineer, and then sue each other. And that seemed strange at the time
For the
for the damage
The
that
damage.
was created as a result
Ah.
of these permits. And I just wonder, you know, reading this on its face, like I understand this broadly, but given the fact that, you know, in the last 15 years, at least since I've been here, I've seen buildings go up that, you know, having now had the direct experience of seeing what happened on the ground firsthand, people were given building permits that changed the hydrology
Mhm.
in the county. Is there any, like, does the county draw any line around that, or is it simply the
Well,
absolute, you know,
the
no taking
building-
of responsibility?
I mean, the building department, building permits issued should always be, they always take into consideration. So I don't know what happened in this case, but they always take into consideration as required to follow the stormwater management plan and the construction design standards, which say that if you are going to alter the natural drainage, that you have to provide some other, you know, way for the water to either be, for the runoff to either be detained or to be flow off of the property in a way that connects back up to the natural drainage.
Mm.
So that would be the normal, that would be standard procedure now. And if there was something that happened in the past, I mean, I know that, right, with we are having this conversation right now with building the engineer about like individual building permits on lots where in the past, I don't think that they did require like in detention basins or drainage improvements per se. But I cannot see a scenario where they would have approved just like blocking its natural drainage or something like that.
Yeah, and in this case, it wasn't a natural drainage, it was, in the case that water did jump out of the creek, the way it would naturally flow.
Yeah,
But anyway, just glad to hear that conversation's continuing, because I think
yeah,
going forward, this is great. And we also know in a small town, limited resources, maybe over the last 20 years or so,
yeah,
things don't always get caught, I guess. So,
Right.
but glad to know that conversation is
Yeah.
still happening.
and actually, I think that the county's been really good in a lot of cases where if there's like pretty obvious evidence or remembrance that that was something that the county approved in error, that a lot of times, like Bill Jackson or whoever will go out and like actually just do the work to help the property owner. In many cases, that's been handled in that way.
I was only thinking about the property owners I don't think it's your area, where there, remember all the springs for Pack Creek that kind of regenerate Pack Creek. And they complained about the work that had been done, I don't know, 8 or 9 houses with water coming down and flooding basements and stuff. And I think the county pretty much said, well, maybe people didn't follow their plans when the actual construction happened, but I don't know
Yeah.
whatever happened to that.
Yeah.
That does happen, that's happened for sure in another instance, so, I mean, it can be kind of complicated, and it's like, where do you draw the line, kind of, you know, sometimes it is in the stage of construction and finalizing and getting the final inspections, which I think in the past, maybe, you know, that could have been better, but now we have our house engineer, so we have inspections happening all the time.
And he is slated to sign up on all building permits, so single family dwellings or other, which is great, and he's pretty.
He's very thorough, like, he'll admit, it's almost too much, but it's great.
I would never say it.
All right.
One good thing about having him here is he is pretty accessible. I've already met with him once where we had some problems and he's good. He knows what he's doing.
It was super nice. I think it was his first day and someone from the urban development team popped in. They were asking drainage questions and he immediately said, let's go out and do a site visit right now. And they left and it was great.
That's so
what happened
different than what we had before,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah, just by the sheer, you know, location being outside of Green County for that.
Yeah.
Not to say that the engineers that we had were amazingly qualified and great, but in every way, but it's just having somebody here is a game changer.
Good. All right, anything else from staff updates?
That's it.
Great, well, we will go ahead. Oh, my goodness,
Yeah,
I didn't do citizens
Citizens
to be
to be
heard.
heard.
Were you here, citizens to be heard, or for the public hearing?
I'm just
You're just here, visitor. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm.
I had a question for
and
you.
you haven't made us talk about our conflicts of interest either.
Jumped right into it. It's something
You did,
about
that's good.
August, it's been hot. I don't think, do we have anybody on for, is it visitor? I don't think so.
no.
Do we have any conflicts of interest or any disclosures before we go into our public hearing?
I'm part owner in a high density housing overlay development.
Right.
I had a question for the county people. So when the ADOs that didn't get approved, was it public clamor or was it the lack of the perceived lack of enforcement that sunk the ones that didn't get?
Oh,
Or was it anything we ought to
I think it's a
consider?
combination of that, because the public clamor was actually, a lot of the public was commenting, using that as a reason not to approve.
Yeah.
You know, using the fact that we couldn't necessarily clearly enforce the ADOs, they were calling that out as a reason not to approve.
Right, so I guess I ask all of us, should we like look into tightening that up?
Or is there anything
I
else
think
we
we
ought?
are looking into it, actually. At that meeting, I believe the final word was that we were gonna still work with the attorney's office on drafting some potential rules and regulations, just like the HGHO program has. And that would be the way to possibly further enforce, you know.
Do you feel if that was tightened up, Trish, that would have changed any votes?
I don't. Oh, that's a question. for Trish.
Yeah, it was exciting.
I don't know that it's, just given the fact that some of these could potentially come back to the county commission, I don't know that asking Trish to speculate on that makes sense, but I would say that, given that I'm a majority member of our county commission, were serving last fall when this was approved in its current state, including removing the enforcement mechanisms after it left the planning commission. I find it hard, regardless of how people think about, you know, the projects personally, I don't see how that could be justification. It's not listed as justification criteria. And it wouldn't be appropriate that following the code as it's written and as it's adopted by the county commission somehow would the justification for now not doing it. Like I'm very confused by that, and not just for this particular issue, but we increasingly hear that public clamor is a concern that people have, and waiting until an applicant has spent hours and money and the public process has gone through looking at these projects to raise an issue with the code that was adopted by a majority of the county commissioners 9 months ago is very confusing too.
Yeah, and I think actually I want to clarify a little bit, because towards the end of the meeting, Kevin and I think a handful of the commissioners were in agreement that the way that it was written, they weren't actually too concerned with not being able to enforce. It was like, there's gonna be a way, we're gonna be able to do this. The intent is there.
Yeah.
And that really wasn't the reason for, that wasn't their justification for denying
Right.
the projects that they were, and that was not, it wasn't playing a part in any of the decisions, whether it was approval or denial. In my opinion, that was how I interpreted it.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I don't think that was the major issue.
I think when it came down to it, like the one on Powerhouse Lane was, they cited, being in a rural residential zone, which is one of those, not an eligible zone, I guess, according to our criteria. And then, the road access, traffic impact is another big criteria that had to be considered. And that was one that was cited because that section of the road where the egress and ingress was narrow and dirt. And
then, potential impacts to water. And I threw in wildlife. I was the one who made the motion to deny it. So potential impacts to water and wildlife resources.
Wildlife I can understand there, but if potential impact to water would be used to deny that application, wouldn't that need to be justification for any other application of a similar size or scope? I don't.
Well, it's
why
next
would
to the
water-
creek. It's not the water that they're using. It's just that the development next to Mill Creek.
Gotcha.
And it is always interesting, what I was thinking, and I didn't watch the county thing, I had brought up wildlife and stuff, but it is also interesting as I was going back and kind of reading all of the ordinances at one point, but at the very start, I mean, the county's very clear that the environment's an important thing, kind of framing all of the policies that we have kind of in an introduction. So it's interesting. It is one you can probably pull out and say, well, it's not mentioned in this specific, ADO stuff, but this is something that we do value. And of course, that then leads to public clamor. I never really liked the word public clamor, public input. Now, I understand there's a difference because if it's just clamor, we're not to listen to, but we should listen to public input, even though I would disagree with Trish. I'd put it there, but that's a matter of, the differences of opinions, right? So.
Right.
Perfectly okay.
am I allowed to say anything?
We will have another citizens to be heard in a little bit, but yeah.
How many more units do we have available for the ADO?
36.
What's that?
36.
36, okay.
And then, the desert road, this is mine, and again, Lisa can jump in. So in the intent to apply, I don't think there were any concerns from the neighbor. And then the developer said like, hey, I've, talked to the neighborhood, that it's all good.
Yeah. I'm gonna make that statement.
Thank you.
And I'm just my memory. And then, that was not the case. We had quite a bit of pushback from the neighborhood. So that's why we kind of sent it back like, let's try it again and see if you can come up with something that the neighbors will be, okay with. So.
Okay. Any other questions for staff on that? All right, so it is 4:57. We'll move on to our public hearing. This is a public hearing to consider and make a recommendation on the ordinance to amend the HDHO rules and regulations and section 4.7 of the land use code. This has been an ongoing public process over many months. So It's been really interesting to see this evolve with a bunch of public comment. We will start with a staff report. If anyone is here to make a comment or would like to make a comment on this particular item, we will open the public hearing and give everyone an opportunity to speak. We'll close the public hearing and go into discussion and voting. Oh, Lisa.
So just that brief background here, to expand on what Emily said. So this is an effort to broaden the pool of HTHO eligible households and remove barriers to development of HTHO projects. Consensus has been reached to revise the HTHO program through about a 4-month period of public workshops and planning commission meetings and commission meetings. The revisions include stipulations to improve the process of verifying qualified households as well, in order to assist HASU in that process. So the list of revisions came as a result of several public workshops. Sorry, just reading over myself, sorry. At the last commission meeting, staff presented the planning commission's concern with introducing an income cap for self-employed individuals due to the difficulty of accurately verifying income and the potential added administrative step in the process. The discussion was brief, but it was also late that 15th of that meeting. But essentially the commission members felt that the income cap option for verifying eligibility would not cause undue complications or challenges, and as such requested to leave that language as is. And their suggestions was specifically to base the income cap on some percentage of area median income for Grand County. So my calculations were based on about a $400,000 mortgage, and that's based on kind of the range of what HTHO prices have been between like 260 to 520,000. So I found I feel like that number kind of is a little bit in between and more realistic for what our current market is. So 400,000 for a mortgage. If you do the calculations for Grand County's AMI is 78,500. So in order to keep the housing costs at 30% of your income, the income would have to be at least 160,000 of the 160% of AMI, which would be 125,600 annual income, household income. So that's where that came from.
So is the HCHO that's on the market for $750,000, that's just considered an outlier?
I think it is. I mean, because like a majority of the listings right now are around the 300 to 400,000.
Not to,
But
well,
they are
actually, I've
different,
asked this
they're
question.
different types of homes for sure, like
Yeah. Just wonder if
square footage
square,
wise.
the cost per square foot is equivalent across those different types.
That's a good question. Let's see. I don't know if I have that.
That's
Right
fine,
in
it's
front of
not,
me,
it's
yeah.
not,
Looking at the spreadsheet, but I don't think I can. We'll have to look into it. So yeah, that's where that came from. And I'm having Caitlin kind of help with this and advise. She hasn't gotten back to me, but I want to make sure that we get this right. So if there is a chance that it needs to be adjusted, we can do that, you know, I think before the commission meeting. And the commission could weigh in as well. So another change was to expand the eligibility for actively employed household to the 84532 zip code. And then the other section, or the other point that needed to be made in section 4.7 was to add a stipulation in the deed restriction to require title companies to provide a notice of sale, HASU and the county upon any sale of an HTHO unit, because apparently that step is getting skipped because it's not expressly stated in the deed restriction. And so there's been instances where HASU hasn't been notified when there's change of ownership and that they're not able to actually qualify the owner. That's a big deal. So we're trying to fix that. In the rules and regulations, we removed the requirement for developer investor who is building the project to be qualified as an AEH. In order to allow for outside capital to support the construction of HGHO projects. We removed the ownership restriction for multifamily apartments and developments where units are not sold individually, but are rental units. Those units would remain restricted for occupancy. The developer, owner, or manager of an apartment complex would not have to be a Brown County entity or qualify as an AEH. We clarify that accessory dwelling units within the HGHO district are restricted for occupancy by AEH with the exception of family members. Required that the developer disclose the sale price of HGHO lots or units for the purpose of tracking the program's success. And the last one is that are requiring a developer owner, that's the same thing, we just reiterated the notice of sale requirement in the rules and regulations, so we can make sure that that happens. So those are all the changes that came out of this. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the very first one, and it's, I don't know where I stand on this, but a person with the 75% of their clientele
Right.
in the right place, and then they finally reach this 150% stuff. Do they also have to give up their house because they're no longer eligible? Or, so I now earn 160% of whatever this medium income is going to be. Do I have to leave my house just like a person who
Oh, I see
becomes
what you're saying.
unemployed and actively?
So
household.
you're saying after you qualified and you own the house at that rate of your income being 160% of the AMI,
Right.
and then maybe you start to make more. Would that disqualify you?
Yes,
I don't think it should.
I don't either, but
Yeah.
it's interesting
That's
because,
a good catch.
yeah, so maybe it should be.
Yeah, I think we
whatever
need
can
to
do
address
about
that in the rules and regulations to
Yeah.
say that would not disqualify that person. Yeah, but
I'm kind of,
If there's the underlying understanding that it's all only, the person is only vetted at
right.
the time of purchase.
Yeah,
Right,
And that's, I mean, I think that's the underlying
I think so
clause in
too,
all of
yeah,
this. I don't think it would.
right.
And I
But
don't
there
think we
is that
expressly say that after
re-verification.
every, point in the ordinance. So
Uh-huh.
I would
There's,
say
the only
fine.
thing I would be concerned about is during like the annual re-verification that HASU does.
Yep.
Where I don't know if it's expressly stated that would be.
Oh, because then you're, right, it's AEH then. at that
Yeah.
point.
Well, I'll make a note of that and put that in the rules and regulations to have as a potential revision.
And we
Or
would
is it-
suggest revisions
Oh.
prior to voting, I think.
I just think it's strange. Well, to me, it's like there's the disconnect. Well, this whole program has started, we're trying to target this missing middle. And part of the problem is the disconnect between wages, wealth, and housing prices. And so like 160%, well, what happens in 10 years if real estate quadruples and double wages only double, then those things are skewed as well? Should it be like more like wages compared to the housing market kind of thing? Like, I don't, yeah.
Let's, well, actually, I think that's a really interesting point. I'd like to talk about that a little bit more. I'm gonna move us forward to opening the hearing. I don't know that we'll have anybody join. And then when we start to go into the substantive discussion, I
Yeah,
actually think
sorry.
that that's where, no, I think that that's it's a good point. I think we want to make sure we address that. With that said, at 5:06, I am gonna open our public hearing. If anyone is here or watching on YouTube and wants to join to make a public comment related to this public hearing, now is your opportunity. We received no written comments on this. I don't believe anyway, none that have been forwarded to us. Is anyone
I have
hoping to make?
Public comment. I'll sit over here.
That's
Actually,
very
with
good.
Stephen online, Stephen, I wanted to ask you about this because Commissioner Winfield is in the process of selling an HDHO and has participated in all of the public discussion on this exact topic, including the recommendations before us tonight. And I'm wondering what the difference is and why Steve hasn't been allowed to participate, but Commissioner Winfield has been. Is that an inconsistency, or can we allow Steve to participate in the discussion tonight?
You're gonna have to give me a little bit more context. So
We have
whenever,
two
go ahead.
We have two people who are actively trying to sell HDHO units. One is on the planning commission and one is on the county commission. The member of the county commission who's actively trying to sell an HDHO unit has been allowed to participate in public discussion, while you've directed us to not allow Steve, the planning commission member, to participate in public discussion on the exact same topic. So I just was hoping for some clarification on whether or not Steve can participate in the body's discussion of this recommendation tonight.
There's a different set of rules that apply to your planning and zoning commissioners. And I know, go ahead, I heard somebody say
Oh,
something.
no, we're listening to you.
So where we're at, we have a disclosure from Commissioner Winfield. He's disclosed the conflict that's been recorded with HR to have that on file. With Steve being there as a deciding individual, there are certain restrictions that apply. I've stated that previously. I think I sent an email. If you'd like, I can fully brief it. I've got confused looks from both Commissioner Hedin and yourself. So
Yeah,
if you'd like, I can give you guys a written response on it. That's perfectly fine. If you have questions like this, please shoot me an email so I can provide a legal memo on it, as opposed to kind of a gotcha moment that kind of seems like you're kind of trying to do right now. So
Well, I don't
I'm
think that's
more
true.
than,
It's
I'm,
not-
hang on. I'm more than happy to answer the questions for you. But if you guys have questions that you want a legal memo on, I can give it to you.
So I really don't appreciate you calling it a gotcha moment. It's not a gotcha moment. I'm genuinely asking. Steve has also filed a disclosure with the county. We went through the same process, and Steve is not a deciding member. He's as a recommending body. I guess I'm confused on the difference there, because we've never been alerted to there being any difference when both people will have submitted the disclosure. So it's not a gotcha. We're just trying to understand what
Yeah.
the difference
It
is.
could have just been a mistake, but that wasn't apparent to the conversation when we were having this conversation like several months ago. But yeah.
And I understand that.
He did submit a disclosure statement with specifically about the HGHO development that he's involved in. So I don't know if that maybe does make it possible for Steve then in that case to participate, just kind of like what you were saying with Commissioner Winfield.
I've already said I'm more than happy to write up a legal memo on it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you guys give me any questions that you guys have, I try to tune in to these when I can. We're short-staffed, but if you guys ever have legal questions, shoot me an email and I'm more than happy to write up a response for you folks.
Well, all right, so we'll go forward with that, but yeah, it would be helpful to know, you just, in mentioning that there are different rules for the two bodies, I think that's just not something that, I haven't heard of that ever. And so maybe Stephen, if you could provide some clarification before our next meeting on exactly what the difference is, just so we know going forward.
Of course. Of course.
So, Steve.
Okay, I'm Steve Evers. I'm co-owner of the Murphy Flats condominium project, which is an HGHO project. In reviewing the proposed revised HGHO ordinance and rules and regulations, the thing that really stands out to me is this addition of, well, it's a revision to take away the ownership requirement for apartment and multifamily. It angers me, it saddens me, it befuddles me. So we're doing a condominium project, which was why we settled on that ultimately with our property, was a bit of an evolution that took a lot of guidance from the county planning and zoning department. This was probably 2 or 3 revolutions ago. We did this because we were told that there, as we understood the original intent of the ordinance, that there was no ownership restriction. So okay, we're listening to the county. Sounds like great consultation. We'll go with that. Then you all know the whole snafu that unfurled with this, not the, the owners must also be active employed households as well. That really threw us for a loop. At that point, we were so into it, past the point of no return. But you consider, well, how could we pivot? We had considered multifamily apartments. And well, there's, the owner still has to be a resident. We didn't have the sort of capital to build something like that, so we were going to need an outside investor. And there's just not too many people that fit that bill to be that developer here locally, to be the resident. I've talked with some county commissioners. I've heard some talk about wanting to be a good partner as the county. In fact, even thinking they've been a good partner. I have not experienced a worse partner in any facet of life than Grand County. We tried to state the case to include, because we've caught wind, right, that maybe this change for apartment and multifamily would happen, and that the ownership restriction would be waived for being a resident. We've tried to reason with folks of like why a condo development would actually fit nicely into that, and it wouldn't just be this free for all. Oh, well, now all the houses are going to be sold to out of state or out of towners. What I want Trish, I want a county commissioner, I want the other county commissioners to actually talk and have a conversation with us and look at the numbers to see what could happen if condos were also in that, because there are federal regulations, which we have for our project, we have written into our COA, our R&Rs with the COA, the Condo Owners Association. When you look at it, it would be huge for our project to be able to sell these. And the bottom line is that they are still going to be occupied by locals. I wish someone would really truly hear us out, because honestly, every time we've explained it, it seems like it's just falling on deaf ears, or I don't know exactly what it is. It just doesn't seem like it's really sinking in, because to me, it seemed like it would be a win-win. And I go back to how this has felt for us the entire time. I will never choose to do any work in Grand County again with the county as like a stakeholder, some entity that's invested in the work that we're doing, just flat out. It is, I don't know, if condos aren't included in this, it just feels like being like stabbed in the back and then just like twisted in there as well. Thanks.
Does anyone else wish to make a public comment during the public hearing?
I have a question. So when you say income cap, are you saying, because maybe I'm getting this all wrong, that the individuals applying for, I have lots for sale. I will have lots for sale when I'm done. I'm on Desert Road. And I have 4 lots. Are you saying that whoever purchases those lots and builds has to have an annual income of 125?
Only if they're self-employed, and it's like all these different things. Let me read.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it going,
The short answer is no.
Yeah.
There's
That's
cascading
no.
eligibility.
yeah,
so
there's no way.
If you,
No, it doesn't apply to everybody. It's only if you are trying to be qualified as an AEH under the eligibility requirement of being self-employed. They wanted to have an income. Well, first of all, the first way you could do that is by proving that your local client, you serve 75% or more local clients. And then if you can't do that, then it would go to this next step of like proving that you have 5 years of residency and your income doesn't go beyond that 160% of AMI.
So this,
So it would be a
this
very
is-
rare
this is
instance.
only for someone who is self-employed.
Right.
we've had people who have been involved in this process who have said, I've lived here for X number of years. I'm self-employed, my clientele have shifted, so I no longer meet that 75% local clientele. But for all intents and purposes, I've been locally employed here for however long. And so this is a added mechanism to sort of meet the intent of the underlying ordinance as it was drafted in the first place of serving this missing middle. By recognizing the modern nature in which way people piece together careers and jobs, particularly in communities like ours. So it's a very singular case amongst multiple ways people can be eligible. So
Okay, so you could also have a situation where someone is self-employed and they haven't been self-employed, they've been here since 2014. But they haven't been self-employed since 2014. It's, you know, they're building a business. So say they are 50% of their clientele. And of course, they also have to have a job other than that in the community or sometimes out of the community so they can stay here.
we're going to get into this discussion when we move on to the substantive portion of the discussion. So if you'd like to make a comment to this effect, you're very welcome to read that, to do so into the record, but we'll go into a substantive discussion in just a moment. Did you want to make any comment? And so would you mind stating your name and just kind of?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Becky Manderfield, and I have the development on Desert Road, which has been my worst nightmare. I don't know what all I can say and can't say at this point.
You can make a public comment.
I find it interesting that part of the problem on the ADOs was, why were there no letters to be sent out, like when we did the HDHO to the neighbors? Many people had no idea what was going on there. We could have probably nipped that whole project on Mesa in the bud if the neighbors had known what was happening. Yeah, there were signs up, but you know, not everybody looks at those signs. And I just wondered, why is it? I feel like the ADOs are being looser. It's being much looser. Maybe it's because the HDHOs was such a mess and now you're trying to fix it. With the ADOs, I don't know, but that's one of the things that we felt was a problem in the neighborhood, was that, you know, we had no notification. We had to do that with with my project. All the neighbors had to have letters so that everybody knew what was coming down the pipe, what was happening. And I find it interesting. The people that are involved in the HDHOs are pretty darn committed. They're number one, buying a lot, and number two, building. That's a big commitment, and people don't take that lightly. Where the ADHOs, you're kind of loosening that thing up, and there's no real commitment. There's people here for, I love.
If you could keep your comments relevant to the HDHO and not the ADO, that would
All right. Okay, never mind. I don't know what I can say and what I can't say.
Well, it's a
so
public hearing about HDHO, not about ADO. so.
But there will be a time, again, for public comments in general, which would then be videos and that problem, I think,
Yeah.
is a separate part.
But if you had any other comment related to the HDHO issue that we're considering tonight, that's the sort of framing of the public hearing.
No.
All right, thank you for your comments. Seeing nobody else in the room and nobody else online, we'll go ahead and we'll close the public hearing and move into discussion. And again, just a reminder, we'll want to keep, have a motion on the table once we move into any opinions on whether or not we would or wouldn't vote for something based off certain criteria in the draft. Any discussion?
Yeah, I guess continuing on my thing, seeing that $120,000, you know. What's our definition of like, are we trying to attract the middle class here? I think the middle class is starting to get in that definition to need to be bigger. You know, maybe, yeah. In tying it to median income of Grand County, well, Grand County wages suck. So I would like to see it more like, well, you know, I could make $120,000 and if real estate's $1 million, I still might not be able to afford it. So I see that marriage between the two may be rooted in the same problem that kind of we're dealing with class inequality and wage disparity. So I guess my only discussion is like, is there another thing you can base the qualification off of? I'd personally like to see that cap taken off completely. The idea of the HDHO is to take off limits to, like, I see with Obi like saying, oh, what happens if you make 125,000? Am I gonna lose my housing the next year? That is antithetical to like what we were trying to do. And so I'm kind of like, let's remove the income, because I think it just makes a muddy water. 5 people game the system. Is it gonna get gamed? Is it like a big deal, you know? I just, is it a level of bureaucracy that is just an add-on that doesn't need to be added on, and maybe just causes insecurity with somebody that's like right at the brink of making that? What happens if somebody has like, I have a friend that exactly fits into this profile, and he makes nothing, he's living in the backyard shed, but he might like sell his stake in this app that he's been developing and cash out big, and that would just disqualify him for the whole thing. And he's lived here for over 25 years. So I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know. That's my input on that. And then the other thing I have, I can't quite understand your argument, Steve, when you're explaining that. I thought what you were saying, we were kind of fixing with saying with MFR, we do not have to have in-county capital. We can, like, isn't this changing so we can accept out of county capital, and that was your problem? Or is it, or like, I kind of lost the thread on where you were saying that.
Yeah, so can you restate the question?
Okay, so you were saying the problem you were having was like you had to like get a qualified financer to fund your project. And now we're taking that back with the revision, right? I'm correct in understanding that.
What's included in this
Yeah,
that we're looking at tonight is if you are developing an apartment complex, you don't need to live.
right.
So,
So
yeah.
that, to me, that's a good thing. And is that a good thing or no? Is that what you're saying?
Ultimately, yes, because
Yes.
it's my understanding and how we were advised by the county staff was that the ownership, there was no ownership requirement, so that way we could leverage outside wealth.
Right.
Because there's not enough wealth in Grand County.
Right.
To get up to
So
what we need for the housing.
Is this
stock.
revision fixing what you
It
were
is-
saying? But you just get screwed over, so that.
We're
kinda
getting
sucks.
screwed.
Yeah, but I totally get that.
Yeah.
But is it a good thing to push
So,
forward with this?
yeah, my mindset in creating that comment was, well, I would so part of me wants to have that clause entirely removed
Right,
because of how unfair and just painful that is for us.
right,
But then what good is that? You know, because I think ultimately we do need to leverage the outside wealth
Mhm,
to do something. So I think that is good. And so I have to put my own personal desires to the side.
right,
And so that's why I advocate for us being in there because, well, we would have done
right,
that.
right. Is it too late for you or can you
Yeah,
still,
well,
yeah, yeah, we
Yeah. it's gone.
I would love to ask staff's thoughts on the income cap. It does feel slightly arbitrary to me. And I was wondering if you see this as in more of a, small p political consideration to ensure that there was consensus for moving forward with this general change? Or do you see this as something that is justified
in order to maintain the intent of the original ordinance, putting this income cap on expanding the definition.
Yeah, I think it was just a way to. If we were gonna modify this eligibility requirement to do anything with it, to make it more. Likely that it would work for somebody. This was the commission's kind of stipulation that they wanted to have. They cared about the possibility that somebody who's self-employed could skew the program in terms of their possible income being way out of line with what everybody else could afford in HDHO program.
But on the other hand, that could happen with an actively employed household, as I understand. So somebody can be making $200,000 a year, well, a bit more than this person is, $200,000 a year. And then
But they would,
decide they want to do this kind of housing. And they may just be, maybe just people who say, I'm perfectly happy in a small house. That's not where I want to put my money in, because somebody might also say, well, they could do something else, but they might well do this. And this person who's working 75% with, kind of locals, et cetera, and is self-employed, may want the same kind of housing. I don't see how it differs a great deal.
I guess my only thought, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I would just say that. With the other person who could be making a lot more, there's probably not a large pool of people that are employed in Grand County that would make more, like, on that scale of like over 200,000, you know what I mean? So for the other units, for the other way that you can get it, you can be qualified is by being employed by a local business, and a lot of the local businesses aren't paying those high wages, that high salary.
I mean, I do understand that argument. Also, it's the whole thing with the person that's self-employed. Also, are they, that's why the 75% is there. Are they serving people in the community kind of thing as actively employed households are?
I look at things like this and I look at, if somebody wanted to get around it, how easy is it for it to do, for them to do that? And also, how likely is this to potentially catch somebody who's earnestly trying to stay within the bounds of its intent? So in that second category, you have somebody who fortunately just landed a larger client, and maybe it's even a local client. Now their income tips up over $125,000, which with, the cost of living and wage inflation, that's still a lot of money, but it's increasingly not as much as it used to be in towns like ours. So if this is going to possibly, and honestly, probably deny some people who would otherwise be eligible a chance to participate in the program, that's a challenge for me. So what does this stop? Well, if somebody wants to take advantage of this program and has been here for 5 years, I mean, they could start an independent business and hire themselves and qualify. They can find 2 or 3 neighbors and become their stock trader and qualify. So I just don't see it. That's why I said it feels arbitrary to me. Like, I understand the picture of it sounds great, but if you could get around it if you wanted to, and it's more likely to hurt people who earnestly would otherwise fit the profile, it just seems unnecessary. And I think that's where I would recommend in the discussion, this body consider possibly striking this from whatever recommendation we make going forward.
And if I were to make a comment, and Elisa, you might disagree with me. I didn't feel like, I think there was a few commissioners that were pretty adamant about this. To me, it wasn't a consensus. So
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I think it was the last item on the agenda, and it was, I think there were just folks who were kind of tuning out and not really providing their position on it. And then, but there were a few outspoken commissioners
yeah. So I think if you guys, wanted to modify that and come forward with recommendation, I think that'd be great. So.
And I'm not sure if it was me who raised it, and I'm not sure it was on this topic. There was a question, I think, for actually Stephen, which was, so does this start to get us close to affordable housing to put a how much a person makes, whether they can qualify? And were we gonna ask him that question?
I think we made the, had the realization that when you have an incentive in an
Oh, yes.
incentivized program,
Okay.
you can go ahead and.
That was the answer to my
Yeah.
question, but I forgot it.
Okay.
Any
So
other
if we-
questions for
if we-
staff?
So exactly where are we here? We're talking about striking that section, and then what would that do for
We have a
self-employed?
motion.
Yeah, we would, so if somebody wanted to put a motion on the table, they could recommend that certain provisions are struck or added. And either we vote on that, or if somebody had an alternative motion or an amended motion. So for example, like Jerry, if you wanted to put a motion on the table, you could say, I move to send a favorable recommendation, with the following edits. And then you put this on.
Well, I'm just trying to follow the discussion here.
Yeah,
because
so
I kinda
if we
got
took
lost
out
in-
this, if we took out the income cap, then we'd be left with. Or provide proof at least 5 years residency within the 845 precinct, then that would be it. So as long as, if you couldn't meet the 75% local clients, then you could qualify as a self-employed
5 years
person
residency.
with 5 years of residency.
All right. So I'd make that motion. And I guess we've got, anyways, was there more discussion? Or are we at the motion?
You could put a motion, yeah, we'll still have discussion afterwards, but.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion to accept it as is with the income cap part of section 4.7 struck.
I'd like to second that motion.
Hearing that it being.
Oh, no, that's fine, go for it.
Oh, I thought you were just raising.
No,
your hand.
no, they're fine.
All right, well, we have a motion on the table by Jerry, seconded by Obi, to send a favorable recommendation, as stated in the packet with the, edit of removing the income requirements of section 4.7.3, thank you. Any further discussion? The floor is yours if you'd like to talk about it.
I think the discussion we had so far was pretty good, and for me, the other part of this is, I think it just creates kind of a semi-arbitrary challenge to maintaining the, you know, that particular qualification requirement. And if you look at the things that can vary income, even the things like the sale of a house or, you know, the sale of stock and inheritance, all of those things can pile up so that somebody can have a really big year one year and a small one the next, and a big year this year means, guess what? You don't qualify. And the other thing that's playing in right now is housing values are high, but so are interest rates. And so, you know, if interest rates got back down to 3% like they were, you don't need anywhere near as much income to qualify. So it just makes it difficult to maintain this thing over time. And I think like other people discussed, it's not really, doesn't really add any benefit.
Any additional comment?
No, except you not only summarized our rationales, but added a lot, so it's good backing for the motion.
I did have one question in terms of how family is defined. Is that nuclear family plus one, like parents? Is that cousins? Is that step? I mean, I just know it'll come up, so.
I kind of like was thinking about that in terms of like, well, if we left it without being specific, then is that so bad? I don't know.
Yeah. I could just imagine it comes up in the conversation since it's already been a point of contention.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Stephen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, if we don't define the word family, then they'll just use the standard definition for family. And so it would be more inclusive and less restrictive if there wasn't a definition. But if we want to add a definition, then that can be considered. In the commission meeting, they did specifically talk about parents and normal family relation, probably like 1 or 2 levels of distance away from whoever the owner is. But less is more if you want more people on the definition.
Normal. There that is.
So I guess we, unless somebody objects, we leave as is.
I guess so. Any further comment? Are we ready to call the motion?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I'll go ahead and just reread it quickly and then we will take a vote. Motion by Jerry, seconded by OB to send a favorable recommendation to the commission to approve the ordinance amending section 4.7, the land use code and the HDHO rules and regulations with the following notes and changes to strike the reference to income in section 4.7.3 under definitions. All in favor, raise your hand. Seeing none opposed, one abstention, that passes. All right. Fantastic. Well, that's been a long process. Okay, and that's it for our standard agenda. Anything else from you? Well, I have some kind of melancholy news to share. I wanted to get an email out before this, but I am going to be putting in my letter of resignation from the planning commission. And I am sorry to do that. I have another year on my term. I've served for, at this point, coming up close to 10 years, or 8 years anyway, but I just, I've been doing a lot of reflection with Jeff and looking at other demands on my time from my family and work. And, you know, also quite frankly, if I can soapbox for just a second, I think we have a lot of really wonderful people volunteering their time, taking time away from their family. And it's really unfortunate that there is a political layer or tenor here that I think is unnecessary given the divisiveness nationally. Even earlier in this meeting, you know, volunteers show up earnestly, they show up and they volunteer their time and they give to their community and get nothing in return. And we've had some really, really nasty comments and debates over the last couple of years. And it's really hard to keep showing up as a positive force when you're constantly getting that. And so I think just for the sake of, you know, moving on, it's time. So I'm going to be submitting an email with a letter to the commission. And what I'm planning to do is step down as chair following this meeting. So this is officially my resignation as chair. This will give an opportunity for the body to elect a new chair at the next meeting while I'm still here and to provide support in any transition that is necessary. And I will resign effective the appointment of a replacement. So I'll stay active until a replacement has been held. That feels like a lot of my test. I've been debating with myself on that one for the last couple of weeks and talking to Jeff after this weekend, it just felt right. So anyway.
Sanity is important.
Yeah. My husband's gonna be very happy when I come home and tell him I actually did. I can tell you that. So sorry to end on some melancholy news or, you know, whatever, but other than that, I have no further future business.
Well, we're so grateful for all your years of service. You've been awesome as a chair and as a member of this body. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Amen.
Mhm. With that, shall we adjourn?
Did we have more comments? Is there?
Well, did you want to make a comment? We normally don't do such second citizens we heard, but if you'd like to, now's your opportunity.
You kind of let into it.
I
At this
think you
point,
guys
since
got the
they-
gist of my
I think so.
frustration.
Yeah,
Since,
and tell me, because I don't actually know the noticing
Oh, yeah,
piece
the requirement
for,
was removed back, I think it was a year or so
And
ago.
why?
It was removed from the state. The state doesn't require it anymore, and the land use code also doesn't require it. So it's just been something that we post the public notice signs and we put out the public notices on the online.
So you mean HDHOs don't have to do anymore either?
That's correct.
I think that's a mistake, but
Yeah.
just saying, you know.
so what I would recommend is, because the ordinances, both the ADO ordinance and in this case, the noticing change to the land use code have already gone into effect. I find the most impactful or effective way is actually to write a letter and to point to the place in the code. And I mean, it's always wonderful to make space in public meetings for people to come and be heard, and that's why we have that. But I actually think in this one, writing a letter and pointing to the burden or the need to possibly consider a revision. The city has a code revision suggestion. Does the county have something like that too?
I think no, I don't think we do have that. I mean, you can apply for an actual text amendment to the code.
That's
You
what I
can
mean.
Specifically do that. Yeah, you can apply for that.
So individuals can solicit the county to make a change, and if you wanted to reach out to staff about where in the code that's relevant and recommend and submit a formal request to have that reinstated. You know, and I'm, again, not to soapbox, but like, part of the reason I'm stepping down is I've realized that there's so many people for whom the process is just very, it's not that it's not, transparent, it's that it's not accessible, because you don't even know what is available to you. And, so I would just say, be involved and use your powers, but it's coming to meetings and talking, it's hard to get things pushed forward that way. But writing letters and saying, I specifically think you should change this, and here's why, can be a very effective way to make change. So, and I'm sure staff would be glad to help you find where in the code that relates and point you to the discussion from when it was changed a year and a half ago.
Well, the last commission meeting, when I heard, and I don't remember who was the one that said it. But when it was discussed that the Mesa ADHO person had said that he had talked to all the neighbors. If everybody's believing what somebody comes in with a project for, he never talked to anybody. Not any of us.
Yeah.
None of us he did not knock on doors. He did not come around to see that this was something that everybody would be happy with. And to have heard that in the commissioners meeting, and there were several neighbors that were listening, or watched it after the meeting, and it was quite.
But that's why I would petition for the change, because the fact that it's not required, regardless of whether he said that he did it or not, isn't something that a public body could then use as justification. So it would be maybe something to look into with the neighbors. Sorry, Trish, I didn't mean to speak past you.
Yeah, a couple statements. I agree with you. I think those notifications should go out. It was it worked effectively for me on my street. I mean, we didn't get what we wanted, but we had those notifications, right? And so we had a big, contingency of people really pushing back on a proposed rezone. But two, it was probably me. The reason, and maybe I made, it wasn't understood. My point was, I was kind of stating that he had said that to us, and that obviously wasn't like, I didn't, I'm not stating that I believed him. I was just restating what he had told us. And obviously there was, not validity in that. So that's if that makes some sense. Like, I think I was trying to kind of put him on the hot seat a little bit, right? Like, hey, we were told this, and yet obviously that wasn't the case. But I think in the end, you're right. We have to have more elaborate notification. And I'll state that I got a couple phone calls from adjacent neighbors, not per se to that one, but to the Sherry Griffith one, saying, hey, I see this sign. Can you tell me more about it? Right. And so people are seeing those notifications as far as signage, but they want to know more. And I agree. I think a little postcard is a great way to get it out there.
Any other future considerations? With that?
Yep.
Motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Hey, I'll second.